Pokémon Adventures, Red and Blue, Volume 1. Enhanced Audiobook. Prologue. Red and Polly. The forest was alive with sound. Wild Pidgey cooed from the branches above, while Caterpie crawled through the undergrowth, their soft chirps blending with the rustling leaves. In the heart of the dense greenery, a young boy with jet black hair and a fiery attitude crouched low, his sharp eyes fixed on a nearby clearing. He was barely 14, but carried himself with the confidence of a seasoned trainer. This was Red, a name that echoed in Palatown as much for his brash personality as for his knack with Pokémon. "Easy now, Polly," Red whispered, clutching a Pokeball in his hand. His companion, a stout Poliwhirl, stood at his side, its spiral-patterned belly glinting in the dappled sunlight. The Pokemon's webbed feet shifted slightly on the mossy ground, its large eyes scanning the clearing ahead. Red's gaze followed the Butterfree, flitting gracefully in the sunlight. Its white wings shimmered like gems as it danced through the air, oblivious to the trainer stalking it. Red grinned. "This one's ours," he said confidently. "Go, Poliwhirl!" Poliwhirl sprang forward, leaping into the clearing with surprising agility for its size. It cried, startling the Butterfree, which fluttered higher into the air, its movements now frantic. "Use Water Gun!" Red commanded, his voice brimming with excitement, a jet of water shooting out with incredible force. The spray barely missed Butterfree, who twisted mid-flight, dodging just in time. Red clicked his tongue in frustration. "Darn it! It's fast!" The Butterfree retaliated, scattering a shimmering cloud of golden powder from its wings. "Polly, watch out! That's Stun Spore!" But it was too late. The powder settled over Poliwhirl, and its movements became sluggish. Red clenched his fists. He hated losing, especially in the wild where there were no rules, no referees to call for a timeout. He had to think fast. "Poliwhirl! Bubble attack! Aim wide!" Despite its slowed movements, Poliwhirl obeyed, releasing a flurry of bubbles that scattered through the air. The Butterfree dodged the initial wave, but failed to avoid the final burst. The impact sent it spiraling downward, and Red saw his chance. "Pokeball! Go!" he shouted, hurling an empty ball with all his might. The ball struck the Butterfree mid-fall, opening to engulf it in a flash of red light. It dropped to the ground and wobbled, once, twice, then snapped shut with a satisfying click. Red whooped triumphantly, running over to retrieve his prize. "You see that, Polly?" he said, holding up the Pokeball as though it were a trophy. "That's how a real trainer does it." Poliwhirl managed a weak croak of approval, still sluggish from the Stun Spore. Red chuckled and reached for his bag, pulling out a small spray bottle of Paralyze Heal. "Hold still, buddy," he said, treating Poliwhirl with the antidote. As he worked, a voice rang out from deeper in the forest. "Help! Somebody please!" Red's head snapped up, his carefree grin replaced by a frown. He stuffed the Pokeball into his bag and stood, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the trees. The voice was faint, but the urgency was clear. Without hesitation, he broke into a sprint, Poliwhirl waddling behind him. The scene he stumbled upon was unlike anything he'd ever witnessed. In a small clearing, a young boy, no older than 10, stood frozen in terror. Before him loomed a massive serpentine figure, an Onyx. The rock snake Pokemon towered above the boy, its segmented body of boulders gleaming in the sunlight. Its roar shook the earth, and its tail smashed into the ground, leaving a crater in its wake. The boy's Pokemon, a trembling Rattata, stood between his trainer and the Onyx, baring its tiny fangs in a futile attempt at intimidation. "Hey!" Red shouted, stepping into the clearing. The Onyx turned its head, its beady eyes locking onto the new challenger. Red felt a jolt of fear, but masked it with a cocky smirk. "Pick on someone your own size!" The boy looked at Red with a mixture of relief and confusion. Who are you?" Red didn't answer. He had already stepped forward, Poliwhirl by his side. "Ready for this, Polly?" he asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through him. It responded, shaking off the last of its paralysis. The onyx roared again, the sound echoing through the forest. It lunged forward, its massive body crashing towards them like an avalanche. "Use water gun! Now!" Red shouted. Poliwhirl shot a stream of water directly at the onyx's head. The attack struck true, the water hissing as it met the rocky surface. Onyx reared back, momentarily stunned, and Red seized the opportunity. "Keep up the pressure! Aim for its eyes!" Poliwhirl obeyed, unleashing another torrent of water. The onyx thrashed wildly, its roars growing more frantic. Red could feel the ground shaking beneath his feet, but he held his ground. "Finish it with bubble!" Poliwhirl let out a final burst of bubbles, each one striking the onyx with a surprising force. With a guttural groan, the massive Pokemon collapsed, its body falling to the ground in a cloud of dust. Red let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "And that's how it's done," he muttered, brushing dirt off his jacket. The boy ran to his Rattata, cradling it in his arms. He looked up at Red, his eyes wide with awe. "That was amazing! You're incredible!" Red grinned, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, well, it's no big deal. Just doing what any trainer would." The boy shook his head. "No way! I've never seen anyone take down an onyx like that! You must be a pro!" Red's grin widened. "You could say that," he said, his chest puffing out. "Name's Red, by the way. Remember it, 'cause one day, it's gonna be famous." The boy nodded eagerly. "I'm Joey. Thanks for saving me, Red. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't shown up." Red waved a hand dismissively. "Don't sweat it, but you should probably head back to town. This forest isn't exactly safe for rookies." Joey nodded again, clutching his Rattata tightly. "I will. Thanks again, Red. You're the best." As the boy disappeared into the trees, Red turned back to Poliwhirl, who was looking up at him with an expression that could only be described as pride. "What are you staring at?" Red said, laughing. "Come on, let's get out of here." As they made their way back through the forest, Red couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The thrill of the battle, the rush of victory. It was addictive. He glanced down at the Pokeball containing his new Butterfree and grinned. "One day," he said, more to himself than to Poliwhirl, "I'm gonna be the greatest Pokemon trainer in the world. Just you wait."